Tonight, a portrait of incompetence. A scathing new report lays out how the SEC missed every chance to catch Bernard Madoff as he was robbing investors blind. I'm Maggie Rodriguez. Also tonight, the California wildfires. As the battle turns in favor of the firefighters, some evacuees return to pick up the pieces of their lives. With the H1N1 flu looming, schools across the country are suffering from a shortage of nurses. And meet Hachiko. He may just have been the most loyal dog in the world.
This is the CBS Evening News with Katie Couric.
Good evening. Katie is off tonight. It was the biggest Wall Street fraud in history, and it didn't have to happen, at least not according to a new report from the Inspector General at the Securities and Exchange Commission about the way the agency bungled its investigation of Bernard Madoff. Madoff robbed investors in his Ponzi scheme of an estimated $65 billion. More than 15,400 complaints have been filed. And Chief Investigative Reporter Armen Keteyian tells us tonight the fraud happened right under the nose of the SEC.
The Inspector General's report reads like a roadmap of jaw-dropping incompetence. During 5 inquiries between 1992 and 2008, SEC enforcement staff almost immediately caught Madoff in lies and misrepresentations, but failed to follow up on inconsistencies. Even when Madoff's answers were seemingly implausible, the SEC examiners accepted them at face value. Despite receiving 6 substantive complaints that raised significant red flags, like those expressed by securities expert Harry Markopolos as far back as 1999.
And it took me about 5 minutes to figure out that he was a fraud.
A thorough and competent investigation or examination was never performed. The report also found Madoff intimidated SEC attorneys, dropped names of higher-ups in the agency, and went so far as to claim he was on the short list to be the head of the SEC. To top it off, the agency's efforts were so uncoordinated, staffers didn't know there were 2 simultaneous inquiries being conducted in different cities. How did they find out? Madoff himself told them.
When a federal agency's left hand does not know what the right hand is doing, and it has a mission, which is investor protection, it really calls into question whether that agency was up to the task with which it was charged.
We run the risk of it.
Today, the new SEC chairman, Mary Shapiro, said the fraud was a failure that we continue to regret and one that has led us to reform in many ways how we regulate markets and protect investors.
Madoff told the Inspector General that at one point back in 2006, he thought he was a phone call away from being caught. He said he was, quote, astonished that the SEC did not catch on, Maggie.
That is shameful. Armen Keteyian, thank you, Armen. Now we take you to California, where cooler temperatures are helping firefighters as they battle 7 major wildfires. Officials say the largest, the so-called Station Fire north of Los Angeles, is now 22% contained. But it's already burned 140,000 acres, an area the size of Chicago. 62 homes have been destroyed. 2,000 others remain under an evacuation order. Sandra Hughes reports tonight from Tahunga, California.
The insatiable Station Fire continued its march today in the Angeles National Forest, growing another 13,000 acres overnight. But firefighters were pushing back just as hard, hiking up steep canyons, clearing brush to deprive the fire of fuel.
Have we turned the corner yet? The answer is no, but I think we can see that there might be a warning sign that there's a curve or a corner up ahead.
Today, investigators examined where the fire started last Wednesday, looking for clues as to how it began, possibly lightning, arson, or a man-made accident. Over 90% of California wildfires are caused by people. Nearby, Mount Wilson, home to critical communication towers, remained under threat despite yesterday's aggressive air assaults.
The whole basin depends on this mountain. I mean, from your cell phone to your news transmission and everything in between.
Firefighters are doing what they can to defend Mount Wilson before the flames arrive. They've burned away dry brush, but if the blaze reaches the forest canopy, this place could explode. Evacuation orders for some neighborhoods were lifted. In La Cañada, it was a scene of chaos Saturday. Today, grateful residents returned and found their homes intact.
I was just like, oh my God, thank you so much, the firefighters. Like, thank you so much for saving my house.
But less than 20 miles away in Tujunga, not everyone was so lucky.
There was a room right here.
Roxana Garcia helped her Uncle Tony salvage what was left of his 4 children's education fund, $5,000 in coins. Now it will be used for the basics.
Probably clothes for the kids, and mostly for the baby, because her crib, she doesn't even have a crib right now.
Now, the people who lived in this burned out home have already gone through the rubble. What they found, a toaster, a tea kettle, and a canister. Local fire officials are now questioning whether the U.S. Forest Service cleared enough brush before this fire broke out. Maggie? Sandra Hughes in Southern California. Thank you, Sandra. Unfortunately, it looks like firefighters won't be getting any help from Hurricane Jimena. The storm made landfall on Mexico's Baja Peninsula as a Category 1, but forecasters say it should head back over the Pacific in the next few days. Jimena knocked out power and caused flooding in Los Cabos, but the beach resorts there were spared major damage. President Obama is trying to regain control of the debate over health care reform. The White House said today he'll go to Capitol Hill next Wednesday to make a primetime television address, and he hopes you'll be watching. Here's Nancy Cordes.
White House aides say the president will use this rare address to Congress to finally give lawmakers and the public the specifics they've been begging for.
I think it's going to be very clear on that day where the president believes we should go.
Up until now, Mr. Obama had been content to leave the details of health care reform to Congress to hash out. But that wasn't working, says former Senator Bob Dole, who supports reform.
There's just something that's not right about the president not taking ownership of the most important issue of the century. It's almost as though he was afraid to be president.
Mr. Obama has been a dogged advocate, giving 27 speeches exclusively on health care and mentioning his chief objectives for reform in another 92 remarks.
If you like your doctor, you can keep your doctor. If you're happy with your plan, you keep it. I have been as clear as I can be.
Clear on the broad principles, maybe, but Democrats in Congress want more guidance on the nitty-gritty.
Do you or don't you want a public option? Do you or don't you favor the House approach or the Senate approach?
Freshman Representative Jerry Connolly says he needs to know where the president stands so he can sell that platform to his Virginia constituents.
It can't be our initiative. It has to be his initiative.
Why?
Well, because that's why we have our form of government, the president's lead. And it's very hard to have 435 disparate voices coming out of the House of Representatives.
All those competing voices have led to a lot of uncertainty. 67% of Americans in a new CBS poll say they simply do not understand what's in the health care bills. The president's speech next week in prime time may be his single best opportunity to clear up all the confusion.
And he can regain the footing he's lost if he sets out the agenda.
Congressional Democrats say beyond the specifics, what they really want to hear is passion. The White House promises they'll get it. Maggie?
Nancy Cordes in Washington. Thanks, Nancy. The government today hit Pfizer, the world's largest drug maker, with a record $2.3 billion in fines for violating federal drug marketing rules. Among other things, Pfizer was accused of promoting the pain medication Bextra for unapproved uses. Turning now overseas to the growing violence in Afghanistan. Today, a Taliban suicide bomber blew himself up in the middle of a crowd that was leaving a mosque near Kabul. 24 people were killed, including the country's deputy intelligence chief, an ally of President Karzai. U.S. forces in Afghanistan are locked in a town-by-town battle against the Taliban. And in that battle, guns aren't always the most effective weapons. David Martin reports from the front lines in Yagul Kala in Logar province.
The Afghans call this spectacular mountain bowl the Boogeyman because it's infested with hardcore Taliban. When Captain Jose Vasquez and the 90 soldiers of Cherokee Troop got here last spring, they were attacked every day.
The enemy realized that we were really disrupting their support zones, and they felt the need to try and attempt to take it back.
Vasquez has beaten back the Taliban without losing a single soldier. In a conventional war, you would call that winning, but not in Afghanistan.
I would say it's definitely a tie because right now we have several towns that are just on the edge. How's it going?
So he's meeting with village elders, offering help to people who live in dirt houses and pump their water by hand.
Then the repair of some roads, and then maybe building like a soccer field for the kids.
The elders tell him the men of the village need work.
We're going to talk about more jobs.
27,000 people live in this region. And like the backpacks Vasquez brought for the children, there are not enough troops to go around. To give you an idea of how thinly spread American troops are, counterinsurgency doctrine calls for one soldier to protect every 50 inhabitants. Here, it's one American soldier for every 270. The undertrained and under-equipped Afghan army and police will eventually have to take over here, but not anytime soon.
If I left today, what we've accomplished so far will probably just fall apart.
Vasquez promised the elders 2 new jobs today, and to him that means 2 men earning money instead of shooting at his soldiers. David Martin, CBS News, Yagu Kala.
An update now on our story last night about allegations of misconduct at the U.S. Embassy in Kabul. Photos revealed shocking scenes. Civilian security guards say they were humiliated by superiors during wild parties. Today, a State Department spokesperson said that a full investigation will be launched and added the company that employs the guards could be fired, though he said security was never compromised. Coming up next on the CBS Evening News, with unemployment high, more people are trying to lie their way into jobs. Employers in this country have been laying off workers by the thousands this year. A report out today says more than 1 million jobs have been eliminated since January, 60% more than in the same period last year. And Kelly Wallace tells us the competition for work is so fierce, some of those applying are turning to lying on their resumes.
Good down, Shug. Good down, Luna.
10 years ago, Andrea Stanfield, who now runs an animal rescue company, was dogged by mounting legal bills as she fought for custody of her daughter. She needed a well-paying job.
I would do anything. You know, what's the fastest way to get there before I lose my daughter or lose everything that I have?
But most well-paying jobs required a bachelor's degree. Andrea only had a high school diploma. So the Ohio native lied on her resume, claiming to be a graduate of Akron University, which is actually called the University of Akron.
Did you think about the consequences when you lied?
Not really. I really worked very hard at putting the consequences out of my head.
The lie led to 2 high-level financial jobs and a 6-figure salary, but it also caused severe guilt, anxiety attacks, and a second divorce.
I did lose part of myself, you know, part of my life, and you can't get that back. You just can't. You know, I lived 10 years of my life deceiving everyone I knew.
3 out of 10 people lie on their resumes, according to experts. And in a tight economy with unemployment close to 10%, more job seekers may be feeling desperate enough to stretch the truth.
We have seen a substantial increase in fraudulent resumes over the last 12 to 24 months.
Greg Slamowitz's firm counsels businesses on the importance of screening resumes, but even his company was almost fooled last year until a background check raised suspicions about a candidate's degree and her diploma.
At first glance, it looked good.
On closer examination, 90 was misspelled, and Edmund Brown wasn't even governor at the time.
You're foolish if you do not do a thorough background check on everyone.
Hamilton University and Vanderbilt College are what we call well-known degree mills. These are fictitious institutions.
Ben Allen says clients at his security firm are requesting more in-depth background checks than ever before. 96% of companies nationwide do background checks, up from 66% more than 10 years ago.
People are asking us to check more things than they have historically, so it would suggest that they're more concerned about it.
As for Andrea, after spending a decade looking over her shoulder, she quit her job before getting caught and turned her past into a cautionary tale.
You might be able to pull it off for years, but it's just going to get worse and worse and worse. It's not worth it.
Andrea says her actions cost her integrity. And 10 years later, she's still trying to earn it back.
Kelly Wallace, CBS News, St. Petersburg, Florida.
A new study says people who earn an honest living working for minimum wage are often cheated in their paychecks. In a survey of workers in New York, Los Angeles, and Chicago, more than 2/3 said they'd experienced at least one pay-related violation in the past week, and more than 3/4 who worked overtime said they were not paid for the extra time. Women, the study says, are far more likely to be cheated than men, so be vigilant. This next story has a lot of people shaking their heads, especially moms. On Monday, a 2-year-old girl started crying inside a Walmart in Stone Mountain, Georgia. A stranger warned the mother to keep her quiet. Police say this man, then slapped the baby in the face at least 4 times. Today, 61-year-old Roger Stevens was charged with felony cruelty to children. Coming up next, just as schools are ready to do battle with the H1N1 virus, there's a shortage of school nurses. The H1N1 flu virus is hitting America's college campuses. One college health group today reported more than 1,600 cases among students last week at 165 schools across the nation. The virus has parents of children of any age worried, and Don Teague tells us tonight school nurses could use some reinforcements.
It's the beginning of a new school day in Ardmore, Oklahoma. But for school nurse Renita Dodson, it's like every other day.
Have you ever hurt this ankle before?
Busy.
Goodness.
Dodson is the only full-time nurse in a district with more than 3,000 students. On this morning, she had sick kids in her middle school office, even before the first bell rang. Then spent the rest of the day treating and monitoring kids at 6 other schools across the city.
You got the contact in? We see them first, and that's medical. You know, we're not doctors, but we do the best we can with what we have.
The school nurse workload in Ardmore is far from unique. On average, most school districts around the nation fall well short of the federal recommendation to have at least one registered nurse for every 750 students. The National Association of School Nurses says only 12 states and the District of Columbia meet the standard set by the Centers for Disease Control. In Vermont, there's a nurse for every 275 students, but many more states miss the mark. Oklahoma has just one nurse for every 3,100 students. In Utah, it's one nurse for nearly 4,900 students. About a quarter of all schools, at least 23,000, have no nurses at all.
We have great concern for those children who are in schools without a nurse, particularly with the threat of pandemic of H1N1 flu.
School nurses will be the first line of defense this fall.
If we did have more nurses in the school, I think they probably could see the signs quicker.
In Ardmore, a $1 million cut in this year's budget left no room to hire more nurses.
You know, if we had just any extra monies, we would put more nurses in.
And you need to wash your hands, okay?
Nurse Dobson, like so many others, is outnumbered and worried about what the upcoming flu season may bring. Don Teague, CBS News, Ardmore, Oklahoma.
And now to some news about television news. ABC announced today that Charles Gibson, anchor of World News, will retire at the end of this year. He'll be replaced by Diane Sawyer, who will be leaving Good Morning America. Congratulations to them both. We'll be right back. We end tonight with a tale of devotion that stood the test of time. Barry Peterson in Tokyo reports it began with a bond forged between a dog and his owner more than 80 years ago.
At this crossroad of busy 24/7 Tokyo, 500,000 people a day hurry by. But some pause, spending a moment with a dog who is the stuff of mythology. His gaze looks lonesome, says 11-year-old Shinsaku, like he knows his owner may not come back. His name is Hachiko, who waited every afternoon at the train station for his owner, a professor, who died suddenly in 1925. But Hachiko didn't understand that his master was gone, so for a decade, until he also died, he lived as a stray so he could come to the station at the same time with the same mission, to wait. In 1934, a statue was erected for the dog said to embody Japan's sense of loyalty after he became famous from newspaper articles and books. Tokyo's most famous dog also has a role to play in this modern-day city of 13 million. Because if you want to link up with someone here, you just say, "Meet me at Hachiko." Over the decades, many a friendship started here, and many a blind date that led to marriage. And Hachiko still fuels the popularity of the breed, the Akita, distinctly Japanese, with what some say are distinctly Japanese values. The Akita are like samurai warriors, this breeder explained, instinctively loyal to the leader of their human family. Hachi! Americans will learn Hachiko's story in a Richard Gere movie out later this year, but set in the U.S.
Hey, Hachi! What are you doing? What are you doing here?
Back in Japan, the paw prints at the nearby train station lead thousands to Hachiko, a dog who was forever lonely for one more pat on the head, one last moment of his master's love. Barry Peterson, CBS News, Tokyo.
And that is the CBS Evening News for tonight. For Katie Couric, I'm Maggie Rodriguez. Thanks for watching. I'll see you tomorrow morning on The Early Show. Good night.